Have you ever been told to pay rent for a room in your own child's house? Because I have, and when it happened, I didn't cry, didn't shout. I just looked at my son, the same boy I once bathed, rocked, and walked the floors with when he had colic, and waited to see if he'd flinch. He didn't. He said it again, calm as ice. "From today, you will pay rent for the room you're living in." And beside him, Clara nodded. My daughter-in-law, her smile small and satisfied, like a cat that had just finished her milk. That's how this chapter of my life opened, not with a tragedy, not even with a betrayal, but with a quiet line spoken over coffee in a kitchen that wasn't mine, in a house I'd helped them save from foreclosure 5 years prior, the same house where, after my hip surgery, I was invited to stay as long as you need, Mom. Well, apparently I had needed too long. I felt the words settle around me like a chill. Rent, room, living in, as if I were a tenant, as if I were an inconvenience. Clara set down her mug, crossing her legs in that way she always did when she was about to present a new policy. "It's not about the money," she said smoothly, brushing a crumb from the counter. "It's about fairness. We all contribute here." David, my son, nodded along. My boy who once used to run barefoot through the garden, trailing mud into the house while I chased him with a towel. Now he watched me with the cool detachment of a landlord negotiating a lease. "You're getting Social Security, right?" Clara added. "A small contribution would help with utilities, upkeep, groceries, things you use, things I use." I said nothing, just stood there, back straight, heart thudding in my chest. David reached across the table and touched my hand. "Don't take it the wrong way, Mom. We love having you here. It's just, life is expensive. Clara and I talked about it, and we agreed. It's only fair." They'd agreed, without me. The rest of that day passed in a fog. I stayed quiet through dinner, quietly cleared my plate, and retreated to the small upstairs guest room, or should I say, the room I now apparently rent, with the peeling floral wallpaper and the lopsided dresser David had assembled back when he was still trying. I sat on the edge of the bed, feet dangling, staring at the closet door. My suitcase was still up there on the top shelf. I hadn't touched it in months. Had I overstayed? Had I become a burden? Or was it that my presence no longer added value to their image of themselves, two upwardly mobile professionals with a perfectly curated home? I remembered the letter David wrote me when I broke my arm 5 years ago. "You're our foundation, Mom. You held everything together." And now I was a cost center. The silence in that room was thick. My phone buzzed once, a reminder from the pharmacy about my refill. I didn't answer. I just sat there, an old woman in a borrowed room, feeling something inside me shift. Rent, was it? Fine. But if I was paying rent, I would be a tenant. Not a servant, not a babysitter, not the invisible presence who folded the towels and restocked the toilet paper and never dared to ask for the remote. If they wanted fairness, they'd get fairness. But they would also get truth, and it would start with one small thing. The next morning I made breakfast. Eggs, toast, bacon, all their favorites. I poured Clara her oat milk latte, just as she liked it. She smiled at me over the rim of her mug. "See, this already feels better, like there's balance." I smiled back, small and polite. "Of course, dear," I said. And then I handed her a receipt for the groceries. She blinked. "What's this?" I shrugged. "Just doing my part. If I'm paying rent, I'll keep records. That's what tenants do." Her smile flickered. I turned to David. "And I'd love a copy of the lease agreement, just to understand the terms." He looked stunned. "What lease?" I lifted my coffee. "Well, if I'm paying rent, there should be paperwork, shouldn't there?" That silence was delicious, and it was only the beginning. That morning I walked to the bank. The branch manager, sweet woman named Terry with silver streaks in her curls and a voice like honey, remembered me right away. "Helen," she said, rising from her desk, "I haven't seen you in months. How's that garden of yours?" I didn't smile. "I'm here to separate accounts." Terry's brows lifted. "Is everything all right?" I sat down slowly. My knees ached more these days, but I was steady. "Everything is about to be." We went through the motions. I removed David's secondary access. I closed the shared savings we'd opened together when he was fresh out of college, back when he'd said, "Just in case, Mom. You always have my back." And I opened a new account. Just mine. My name, my control, my key. Terry didn't ask many questions. Older women know. They always know. When I returned to the house, no, I'll stop myself right there. Their house. The mood had shifted. Clara was on the phone, pacing the kitchen in her soft cream sweater and those suede slippers I'd once bought her for Christmas. Her voice was tight, annoyed. "No, that's not what I said. I said she's insisting on receipts. Yes, receipts. For the cereal and the eggs. She handed me a bill like she's an Airbnb guest." She didn't know I was standing right behind her. I cleared my throat. She spun, startled. Then she smiled, quick and sugar-coated. "Oh, Helen, I didn't hear you. I was just talking to—" I didn't care who. "I've been to the bank," I said evenly. "You won't need to worry about depositing anything into the old joint account. I've simplified everything. Easier for everyone." Her face flushed, that mottled pink of someone caught off guard. She opened her mouth, closed it again. "You're making this unnecessarily formal," she finally said. "No, dear," I said softly. "You are." David came home late that evening, tie loosened, sleeves rolled. He walked into the living room where I was knitting and hovered in the doorway like a teenager who'd failed a math test. "Mom," he began, "can we talk?" I set my needles down. "Of course." He sat beside me on the couch, the same couch where, years ago, he'd curled against my side during thunderstorms and whispered, "You're the safest place I know." Now he couldn't even meet my eyes. "It's just, Clara and we've been under a lot of pressure. The mortgage, the kids' activities, her business expenses." "I'm not a line item," I said. He blinked. "What?" I turned to face him fully. "You don't need to explain your spreadsheet to me. I understand what this is. You're trying to rebalance your lives, and you've decided that I tip the scale." "No, it's not like that," he said quickly. "It's just, the cost of living has changed." "Yes, it has." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "And so have I." He went quiet then, just stared at the fireplace, though there was no fire. A full minute passed before he spoke again. "I thought you'd be grateful to stay here." "I was," I said. "At first." And then I stood, slowly, and added, "But you don't give someone a room and then ask them to pay for the air." I left him there, in the flickering light of the television, surrounded by comfort he didn't understand the cost of. I climbed the stairs, my bones aching, and when I reached the top, I paused. The hallway was silent, but inside my chest something was stirring, not bitterness, no, something older, something stronger. I hadn't lived this long to be treated like a burden. That night I opened a notebook I hadn't touched in years, the same one I'd used to budget during the lean years, back when David was in high school and I was stretching canned soup and prayer. On the first page I wrote, "What I owe and what I don't." By morning, the list had 2 columns, one long, one very short. The next day I went house hunting. I found the place by accident. It was a small, sun-drenched cottage on the edge of Maple Lane, just past the park where I used to take David on Saturdays. The sign in the yard was crooked, barely visible behind a hedge that had gone wild, but something about the tilt of the roof and the peeling green shutters spoke to me. It looked like it had known joy once, and like it was ready to know it again. The realtor, a kind man named Jonah who wore suspenders and remembered to call me Ms. Helen, even when I told him not to fuss, walked me through it slowly. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, a clawfoot tub, a back garden, neglected but full of promise. It smelled like sunlight and old stories. I told him I wasn't ready to buy, but I came back the next day. Then the next. By the 3rd visit, I brought my checkbook. And just like that, I had a plan. A quiet one. A private one. I didn't tell David. I didn't tell Clara. Not yet. Some truths are best revealed when the roots are planted deep and steady. Instead, I continued to play their game for a little while longer. Clara began handing me receipts, awkward and clipped. $3.22 for milk. $15.89 for shampoo and toothpaste. I paid each one with exact change. I labeled them, filed them, made notes in my journal. David avoided me. He left early, came home late, said things like, "We'll talk soon," and "I'm just swamped." I knew that rhythm. It was the same song his father used to hum when he was afraid of what I might say next. But it was what I found one Thursday morning that changed everything. It was garbage day. I was taking out the bag, not because it was my job, but because it was habit, one of the invisible things old mothers do when no one's looking. And there, just at the bottom of the bin, I saw it. A printed email. Crinkled, but not torn. From Clara. Subject, plan for full property transfer. The recipient? A real estate lawyer. A woman's name I didn't recognize. The contents were clear, chillingly clear. Once Helen has formally agreed to pay rent, we can treat her as a legal tenant. After 6 months, we initiate paperwork to formalize ownership under our names only. Once she's no longer on the deed, we can explore refinancing options. My name, my home, my life, reduced to leverage. They weren't just asking me to contribute. They were planning to erase me. I stood on the back porch, the email shaking in my hand, the morning light falling across my slippers. I could hear Clara upstairs on the phone, laughing, her light, polished voice, the one she used with bankers and brunch friends, the one she never used with me. The betrayal was not sharp. It was dull, heavy, the weight of years pressing down at once. David knew, or at the very least he didn't not know. He had signed papers once, long ago, giving me partial co-ownership of this house after George died. It had been his idea. "For security, Mom," he said, "so you always have a place." And now that security was being rewritten in whispers and legal jargon, I didn't cry, not then. Instead, I walked to my room. I opened the drawer where I kept old documents, tax forms, the deed. My name was still there, bold, in ink. They couldn't erase me without my consent, but they were planning to. That evening, I placed the printed email in a new folder. I labeled it Helen, Exit Strategy, and then I made a cup of tea, jasmine, no sugar. As I sipped, I imagined the quiet life that cottage could offer, the garden I would plant, the sound of my own clock ticking on my own walls. No more tiptoeing, no more polite silence. They wanted me to become invisible, but before I left, they were going to see me, clearly, all of me. 3 weeks. That's how long I kept my secret. Long enough to finalize the paperwork for the cottage. Long enough to get the deed printed with my name, and only mine, on it. Long enough to begin packing, in the quiet hours, while they slept, or while Clara was out with her mother discussing spa packages and tax deductions over green juice. I started small, a drawer here, a shelf there. I boxed up my memories slowly, reverently, not out of sadness, no, not anymore, but with the kind of gentle detachment you give to something you're finally setting down. The weight of it all, these years of invisible service, began to lift as I folded my wedding quilt and wrapped the photo of baby David in soft towels. The day before I planned to leave, Clara cornered me in the kitchen. She had on her navy blazer, the one with the gold buttons that made her look like she was always en route to a yacht club meeting, and that sharp little smile that never quite touched her eyes. "I've scheduled a meeting with the bank," she said, pouring almond milk into her smoothie without looking at me. "It's about the refinance, just paperwork, really, but we'll need you to sign a few things this week, all standard. Won't take long." I looked at her hands. Perfect manicure. French tips. I wondered what they would look like clutching empty air. "Of course," I said calmly. "Just leave them on the counter." I knew she didn't read me. She never had. Later that evening, I made my final preparations. I transferred the last of my savings into my new account. I canceled my cell plan, the one they used to contact me about car appointments and grocery runs. I wrote a short note to David, nothing dramatic, just a line he used to say when he was little and didn't want me to leave the room. "Be right back." Then I placed the folder with Clara's email, the one about the property transfer, on the kitchen table with a single word written on the cover: intent. By dawn, I was gone. The moving truck came at 6. 2 men, polite and efficient. They called me ma'am and wrapped my furniture with care. One of them asked, "Starting over?" "No," I said with a small smile, finally continuing. The cottage was still quiet when I arrived. The key turned smoothly in the lock. My new home smelled like pine and promise. I walked through each room barefoot, letting the floorboards learn my steps. The next morning, the storm came. It began with a phone call, 7 of them, in fact, all from David. I let them go to voicemail. Then came the texts, rapid fire. "Mom, where are you? Clara said you left? What is this folder? What is going on? Did you take your things? Are you okay?" That last one was rich. Clara's email must have hit like a brick. It was evidence, proof of manipulation. And I had left it sitting in plain sight like a calling card. I let them stew for a day. Then I called back. David answered on the first ring, breathless. "Mom, what is going on? Clara's freaking out. You just disappeared." "I moved out," I said, voice even. "You what?" "I moved, found a little place, quiet, peaceful. It's mine." There was silence on the other end. I could hear Clara in the background, her voice high and sharp, trying, as always, to control the narrative. "I don't understand," David said finally. "Why would you do this?" That question settled in my bones like an echo. Why would you do this? He wasn't angry. He was bewildered. He genuinely didn't see it. So I told him. "Because I won't be erased, David. Because your wife printed out a plan to steal the roof from over my head and call it equity. Because you let her, and because I don't owe anyone rent for the life I built with my own hands." He didn't speak. I could hear him breathing, that broken, hollow sound men make when they finally realize the ground beneath them is not as solid as they believed. "I left you a copy of the email," I continued gently. "I suggest you read it again, slowly." "I never meant," he started. "I know," I said, "but you let it happen." He asked if he could come see me. I said not yet. Then the messages from Clara began. "We need to discuss this. You're being emotional. This isn't fair to David. You owe us a conversation. This will ruin everything. Please, Helen, be reasonable, reasonable." That word used to scare me. It was the trap they laid to keep me quiet. Now it just made me laugh. 2 nights later, I got a letter from their lawyer. Yes, a lawyer. It was a thinly veiled threat, a suggestion that if I didn't return and sign the transition documents, they would explore other options. Clara had called it a tenant matter. She claimed I had vacated without notice and that the space was now part of their refinancing structure. She wanted me to look like a squatter. She wanted to erase me legally, even though I was still on the deed. It was cruel, it was strategic, and it was a mistake, because I wasn't the woman who kept her head down anymore. I was the woman with a folder full of receipts, a title in my name, and a fire in her chest. So I made one phone call to my lawyer friend Amelia, and together we drafted a response Clara would never forget. Amelia's letter was 6 pages long, elegant, precise. Every word weighed like a stone. She called it a formal response. I called it the reckoning. We mailed it certified, return receipt. Sent a digital copy, too, just in case Clara thought she could claim she never saw it. I imagined her reading it in the kitchen I used to scrub, gripping her oat milk latte with whitening knuckles. Imagine the look on her face when she read the phrase, attempted coercion of a legal co-owner, or the line about intent to commit property fraud under false landlord pretenses. Amelia had a gift for making truth feel like thunder. And just like that, everything stopped. The calls, the texts, even the lawyer went quiet. Then one morning, not a week later, I opened my front door to find a familiar car parked on my gravel path. Not the SUV, Clara's Kingdom on Wheels, but the old silver Honda David had before her. The one with the scratch on the left door I told him to keep. As a reminder, not everything needs replacing. He stepped out slowly. No designer watch, no pressed collar. Just my son, looking smaller than I remembered, holding something in both hands. Not a legal notice, not a bill. A pie. Apple. The kind I used to make when he had strep throat as a boy. I wasn't sure what to bring, he said, voice hoarse. Pie's a good start, I said softly, stepping aside. He didn't come in right away, just stood there, his eyes traveling the room, the walls, the quiet corners of this new life I'd built for myself. It's nice here, he said. It's mine, I replied. He nodded, swallowing hard. We sat at the little pine table by the window, the one I'd sanded and varnished myself. I cut us each a slice. He didn't eat, just stared at the steam rising from the crust. Finally he spoke. She told me you were spiraling, that you were confused, paranoid, that you were lashing out. His voice cracked, and I believed her. I didn't look away. Do you know why? He asked. I shook my head. Because it was easier than admitting I'd failed you, that I let my own wife draft plans to evict you from your life while I stood there holding the pen. I sipped my tea, letting the silence hold him. She said you owed us support, that you were lucky to live with us, that it was time you gave back. She was wrong, I said. He looked up. And so was I. He pulled a thin folder from his bag and set it on the table. Her refinance plan. I canceled it. The bank's no longer moving forward, and I'm filing for divorce. I blinked, not out of shock, but because for the first time in years I saw him, not the tired, overworked man I'd watched become smaller under her voice, but my boy, whole again. She wanted to strip you of your dignity, he said, and I helped her do it. I don't know how to live with that. I reached across the table and took his hand. Then don't, I said. Start over. He nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping as if some weight had finally found the floor. I don't deserve your forgiveness, he whispered. Forgiveness isn't something we deserve, I said. It's something we choose to give, or not. And right now, I paused, my voice soft, steady. I'm choosing peace. He exhaled, a slow, quiet sound. We sat in that stillness, two people rebuilding something broken, not rushing it, not pretending it hadn't cracked, but beginning again. A week later, I received a notice. Clara's attorney had withdrawn representation. The property transfer plan had been dropped. And most satisfyingly of all, a one-sentence email from her. "I underestimated you. I didn't respond. Some people deserve silence." Instead, I went outside. The garden behind my cottage was already blooming, lavender, rosemary, a few defiant poppies. I planted a rose bush that afternoon, a hardy variety, thorned, resilient, like me. Because here's the thing, darling. When they stop seeing your worth, you must see it for yourself. When they write you out of your own story, you pick up the pen and start a new page. I did not leave with bitterness. I left with boundaries. And when I closed that door behind me, I didn't slam it. I simply turned the handle, stepped into the light, and whispered to the wind, "Let them wonder."